I just wanted to say a few things about the children of Montauk and say some thoughts about them since they were so overlooked, it seems, in history. And what I'm hoping to happen this year in 2018 is just a call to be sent out for the remainder ones to find healing and to find healing from all the damage that was done and the silencing of their stories so that they would be able to find a platform to be able to come out and to speak, and then healing to come through all that fracturing that happened there. And because it takes a long time to deprogram and it's hard, but you just got to keep at it and keep doing it, and then you'll get to the root. I mean, you'll never have all the answers, but at least you'll be able to unbind yourself from degrees of it and have more clarity and clean conscience, hopefully. So I just pray that with the new moon and all these energies and revelations pouring down at this time period, that all that psychic debris that people carry from Montauk would be released and removed, and that people can just look at it for what it is and remember things, see things clearly for what they are, have clarity and peace of mind, because peace of mind is the greatest gift God's ever given me, and I wouldn't trade that for the world. Um, so whatever remainders there are of Montauk, I would just hope that all those phantom pulses or anything that's still in people and Latin programming, that would just come out and be uprooted and cleared, because you're doing humanity a huge favor if you do it, if you survived Montauk. So I have no doubt that that base will be destroyed soon, and I'm not really worried about that. I just wanted to share some thoughts on like the originals memory banks and send a call out for the trauma release, because in the first like week, in the first few weeks, I remember when the originals were there, they would realize that we had power in numbers. Like if two kids were together and they were really strong, they would always try to break that bond or separate them. And for instance, like me and my brother were really powerful together, and we'd always try to do things like put our hands together and put out energy, try to shield ourselves, open portals, do whatever we thought that we could do, or test in the envelope always. And we just said no to the bullshit right away, and because we were trapped. So we repelled the fallen ones' energies like a force field, because you had to, because it was always a state of flight or fight, and you had to fight, because if you had flight, you wouldn't survive. So the reptilians had us working initially in this like slave labor camp, because they had us collecting wood and picking up pallets, and they would drive around in these little vehicles, and you could they had a hard time not eating children too. So it's like you always had to defend yourself whenever you're around them, and have that guard and that shield up, because they would just turn and try to go after you because they just couldn't help it. But I was in the back, and two of them were driving, and you could hear their language, and they speak backwards to each other, and then they make clicks and weird sounds to each other, and I could understand it sometimes, but not all the time. But me and my brother were teaching this little kid named Lane how to shield and how to repel them, and all the kids just taught each other, because we were always talking amongst ourselves and trying to figure everything out every day, all the time. Just any little tip to help us survive was very helpful. So it's like we had to create a bubble around ourselves initially, and if you didn't know how to do that, then you weren't doing very good. But it was deep state indoctrination right from the get go. Like after the green room, then we were told that we were in a different country. They had us all in regalia, sitting in the chairs, and then they had the screen out in front, and we thought that the president of the United States was talking to us and telling us that we were in big trouble, and we were just shrinking in our seats, I remember, and we're told we couldn't go back home, and we had to work our way back home or something. And they just always piled and piled on the lies. And Caspel was right in front of me, and he was a taller kid, and he was smart because he never really fed into the bullshit right away either. But he would always say things that would make us think, and then it actually helped a lot of us to snap out of our stupor, because when they were talking about betraying your country and whatnot, he'd be like, "But I'm from England. I'm from England." And then we all would look at each other and start thinking, and and then start questioning what they were saying, because not everybody there was from America, and there's kids from Canada there and all over. So they always had like a backup plan though, because they never knew how to gauge our reactions, because we would always try to be unexpected and they would always try to be unexpected. So it was just constant psychological warfare from the initial stage timelines. But yeah, when we'd start questioning what they were saying, it's like they would freak out right away, and then they'd have like a backup plan, like they'd put some magistrate or prime minister on the screen too, and these people were probably just actors, and some of us saw right through it. So I'm actually really grateful that those kids just spoke up right away, and they would like wake us up with the things that they were saying. Because the other controllers, they were trying to blackmail us all the time, and they used a lot of legality and words that we, of course, didn't understand, and they'd scream it in our faces, so we had no idea what they were talking about most of the time. And like I had a German handler screaming at me all the time, and then somebody in English, and they get right in your face and just scream at you for like ever, and it was just day in day out the same thing over and over and over and over until you eventually took the Kool-Aid. But we didn't know what the hell was going on for the longest time, and I thought I was in Germany. I remember because it was hard to see through at first when you're that young, but then the older boys figured it out, and they just said that they're actors or they're in uniform. And I remember my brother and Caspel coming up to me one day when I was outside, and they shook my arms, and they're like, "You're not in Germany." And then I finally realized that I wasn't in Germany, and then that shook me out of my stupor. But then I felt stupid because there was all these other kids that were figuring out more stuff than me faster. So then we'd always try to see who was the smartest and who had the best intel, because you didn't want to be behind in anything there, because if you got behind in anything, you'd risk dying basically. So and we try to figure out all these ways to get out, and the fear programming kicked in, and that took hold of us pretty bad, because they were after adrenochrome, and they would go after the ones who screamed the most, and we had to go on these walks all the time, and it was like out on these trails, and then they had these reptilians come out of the holes in the ground, or like the bunker doors, I guess you call them. And so we'd stop there, and it was just like the It Clown, because it would come right up and it would pull your pants down, almost trying to pull you into the hole, and the kids would be screaming and freaking out, and then they'd ask you a question over and over, or you'd have to say something like allegiance, and you didn't want to get eaten by this thing. So then most of the kids said what they wanted you to say, or yes, and then you'd get to go with your handler. But they did take some kids down in those holes, because that's how they got us to just get used to this killing game. And like the last kid usually at the end of the line would be the one who would get taken into the hole, into the underground. And we didn't know if he got eaten or what happened to him, but they always made sure they did that to seal the deal. And you never wanted to be the last kid in line because of that. So they did a lot of drills like that, and it was just compliance, and left us with more helpless feelings. And I really think that was just the whole point of these drills. So then they had this blacktop little road with these little brick buildings that we'd always walk down to, and I always hated it because we had to walk in a straight line, and they wanted to control not only your mind, but they wanted to control every aspect of your whole body. So we were fighting for that pretty bad at first, I remember, because I was always trying to fight my handler controlling my eyes, because they can control your lateral eye movement. So I'd always want to look at his eyes, but he would always just tell me to keep looking straight, and I would just fight all the time to do that, and to circumvent in this circular movement ways to get around that. Because I mean, they could make you look down, they could make you look up, and your eyes were jutting at first, and then you had to find ways to control your eyes, your body, your mind, your heartbeat, not have panic attacks, all that. So then they bribed us with like Snickers bars, and you can have a room of your own. The kids that got into the special projects, usually the deeper experimentation parts of Montauk, had their own rooms, but they were just containment units because you're still in the layer. But they got some type of consent out of us, and what they did with me is when I got into this like white room with the director, they brought in my oldest brother, and I could see him in a chair. And then I remember that he was pretty out of it and pretty drugged because he was probably one of the first Montauk boys way back then. And I think he was probably a teenager by that point, but they had him drugged pretty bad, and he was in the chair, and then he saw me, and then I had to do what this director wanted me to do in order to see him. And so they used people's families against each other, and that's how they tore up families too. And so, you know, he consented to whatever they wanted him to do, and then I consented so that we thought that we would be okay or get to see each other, but that really didn't happen because I was always looking for him anyway. So his more lies, and that was the last time I think I saw him in his normal youthful state of mind, because he was pretty changed after that. And then later on, they told me that he was one of their best ones and that I could be like him. So I was trying to climb the ranks, just not only to see him, but maybe to be like him. So it was more mind games. So yeah, they use people's whole families against them too. And they go after your mind first. But I got my mind back, and they didn't succeed. So their plans can always change, and they still do to this day. And James Rink, I met there, and I met him in the dorm. There was a long dorm that they threw the kids in at first, and they brought him in with a truck and threw him in there. And then the girls were on the bottom, and there was like 2 cameras on the end, and then a small bathroom. And then there was these steps leading upstairs, and everything was wooden floors. So this little kid, Lane, that I was really bonded with, slept with me, and I remember cuddling with him, holding him, and he had a brown stuffed animal, and he was just amazing. So I just I gave him all the goodness I thought I had, because I didn't know if they were going to take it away. And our bond was like super strong. And then somehow they cued into that, and then they took him away and said he couldn't be there. And this guy came in and then took him upstairs, and they pulled our bond apart from the beginning. They tried to, because they knew it was so powerful. And they made him go upstairs, and I was protective of him at this point. So he was like my little hero. So I remember going up the steps, yelling at the guy first. And then when he left and went out the door, I went upstairs and I told all the boys that were sitting there in their bunk beds, I told them, he likes girls. He likes girls. And I was just like so adamant about saying this. And it was traumatizing because, you know, he dropped his stuffed animal at the end of the steps, and I ran up there, and it's like I was having a panic attack about it. And I just kept saying the same thing. He likes girls. And I made sure that every boy heard that. And then I just heard this like candid and calm voice go say to my brother, "What's your sister's name?" And he said, "Jerusha." And then he said, "Jerusha, I know that he likes girls. He doesn't like boys." And it was Casbolt that was sitting across from my brother, and I just kind of calmed right down at that word, because that's, I guess, what I needed to hear. And I know that they actually collected any stuffed animals that a kid that was brought in with one had, and then they put them on the top of a bunk bed, and then eventually they took them away. So they like took away the last remnants of what we had, and they're just always trying to erase our memories or erase our lives. It's just so weird. And so after Casbolt said that, then I calmed down, and you know, even though he had his dark side later and probably went to the dark side, he was an empathetic and kind kid, and then became a leader that we looked up to, because because we looked to him for the answers in such a confusing place, because in the beginning he was just the one that questioned it the most. So, and people follow a leader, and when he turned to the alpha unit, then that's why some of the people followed him into alpha too. But that's the way I'm going to choose to remember him. Everybody has their own opinions, but because we were all good at first, and it's just the programming that took hold of us. So then it's like the alpha unit kids were despised because they were calling them killers and sellouts, and but they, we were so brainwashed that we didn't even like see that. We didn't even acknowledge it. We'd just be like, no, we're not. Like, what are you talking about? Like we didn't even know. Because like even Laura Eisenhower, I remember sitting in class and I'd look over at her, and eventually the kids got evil, and I could see a gray looking right at me through her face, and it would always turn and like sneer at me, and then you could just like see people's attachments forming and what they had become over time, because we were all psychically bonded in some way. So we were trying to constantly dismantle the control grids, and because they were always trying to hack into us and just keep hacking into us so that our thoughts became their thoughts and we'd reflect what they were. And they wanted that more than anything. They wanted us to look at them and it'd be like a mirror image. That's what they wanted. And we'd be outside in the day in front of the dorm, and then the boys would wrestle. I remember, and then they nicknamed Lane Wolverine because he was a really good wrestler, and he was just this like ball of fun that we all really enjoyed. And he was the youngest of all of us, and we all just kept saying, I can't believe it, he's the youngest kid, and he's just the best wrestler, because he'd wrestle and he'd roll like a Wolverine, and then he'd like jump up and come at you, and it's like he never stopped. So, and he'd charge at you. So I even wrestled with him, and he was like a little grizzly bear. So I wanted to carry him around like a teddy bear at first. But he was just one big ball of energy at first, and he was the one that everybody protected right away. And then I don't know what happened, and he grew to be really strong, and we all changed over time. But I remember when he was 4. But Rink, whatever shattered him in the beginning was probably the way that he got in trouble, and then he resented us for it, and then he was mean to the kids for that, because I think the way that they punished him made an example out of him for us, and they like showed him to us like, don't try this. But because in the dorm, okay, after the guy left and I had the anxiety attack, and Casbolt calmed me down, then I looked right over at Rink, and he was just this like short kid standing in the corner by his bunk bed, and I was like, what's wrong with this kid? But I thought he was I thought it was hard for me to have a panic attack, and then I looked at him and felt okay, because he was having more than a panic attack, and he was just like standing there shaking, and like his head was up, and he was in like this trance, and he was like calling out, and he was making this weird noise. And because we were all connected to like a different star system, and they'd always try to jam any type of calling out to heaven, even our prayers. So he starts making this weird noise, and like a bird almost, and then his eyes change, and then his body goes like morphing. It was like in and out really quick, like a hologram. Like his particles were pulsing and like phasing and blinking or bleeping. And I just looked back like, whoa. And he had some yellow and blue popping energy to him. So, and then Casbolt says he's been doing that for a while, and they didn't know what to think. They just said he doesn't say much. And I said, why? And they said, I don't know. Like nobody knew. Because he really wouldn't tell you anything. So then they get this plan to climb down the dorm, because it had a rail at the end, and there was like 3 or 4 boys upstairs, and they got out on the balcony, and then they made him go first because he was little, and they didn't know what if he had this like ability. to him or something, but nobody wanted to go first because we were all like contemplating it and trying to be quiet and bickering and not get seen by the light. And then some boy shoves him off down, and then but he landed fine. And then he made some weird like jerking move. He like panicked really fast, and then his like energy shifted so fast that he looked like this little elf alien boy for a second. And we're all like, whoa, and he books around the corner this really fast, and then he goes into the woods. And I'm trying to like get out onto the balcony to see this because I was shorter and like the kids were lined up, and then some kids ran over to the window over here to see this because it was a show. And then everybody's trying to see him, and then we see these like tan trucks pull up and these truck lights, and another boy that was trying to climb down was trying to climb back up. So then we see these like flickering lights in the woods, and it's we see like green like lasers or something, and then we're like, holy shit, there's like a green UFO out there is what we thought. And while he's trying to escape, it's probably just night vision that they had, and you could see this green and like guys trying to chase people. I think maybe one other kid got out too because somebody made it like down the road. Like sometimes we got pretty far with trying to escape, and then they just bring us back and they chase after you. And they probably had the night goggles, the vision on, and so we were just seeing this green light, and then the show in the woods, and it was just crazy because you could see him, and then he was freaking out and shaking like a paint can. But they got him somehow, and then I'm sure they punished him, and then they brought him back into the dorm. So, and then we're just sitting there, and we're like thinking, like, if this invisible like supernatural alien boy can't escape, then what the hell are we gonna do? So then we'd always try to come up with a different plan. And yeah, it was just crazy. So it was like a prison complex, and they had us in frequency grids and all these entrappings. But it's like they were always trying to up it because we'd break through one thing and then they'd bring in another thing the next day, and just echoing back and forth. And there was always trying to focus on just keeping us gridlocked in. So some of us kept pushing the envelope, and we punched through a lot of it. Actually, like we were a lot stronger than what they thought, because I mean, God knows how much money they spent on all this crap, or on the reasons they did all this to people. It's just insane. But I remember I could channel this energy from the ground too, and I'd pull it up, and then it'd be like I'd get like a boost from it, almost like jumping up, and it would like lift me a little, and then it was a buoyancy, and then I'd teach the other kids how to do that. And the plasma and the energy there was like so thick, and this green line of energy, that it was like sticky on your skin. So we were like glowing in neon sometimes out there at night. But anyways, with the science of mind control, like Preston and Cameron said, that most everyone out there was voluntary, and that is true somewhat. But with this level of brainwashing, it's like they laid a ton of bricks on you, and then they told you that you were just there voluntarily, or you were a volunteer, or you could leave. And then when you were like, what do you mean? I have a job to do or something, then they knew that they had you. So then it's like they built a fortress around you for a long time, and then they slowly took it off. And then when they thought it was, you're in the clear, then they didn't need to monitor you so much. But so it's like they made you think that you could leave, but you really couldn't. But they just wanted you to say that. That's Stockholm syndrome. So they had us at Stockholm syndrome when we were teenagers, and they built a system and a fence around each one of us, and then they knew that when the time was right to take it away and test us and see what we do. But they didn't realize that they gave us the keys, some of us, to dismantle the whole system. And they just thought, that we were totally under, and it was a cage that we could never walk out of, and that we never would realize we could walk out of. And I think that's what it was like in the end, because that's what it seems like to me, because not many people were there at the end. But then they had their best ones still there in the background, because people live there. And some of us woke up, but they were thought they were so good and they didn't need to worry about us anymore. So if they got you to stay as an asset, then they offered you like a lot of perks or an apartment and drugs. But it was just so that they could keep fucking with you and then bring your altars out, give you some freedom that you thought you had when you really didn't. And you thought it was your life, but it really was no life because they could have all access to you still, and they could just barge in your room in the morning and throw you around, beat you up, have you take pills or anything, bring an altar out. They could do whatever they wanted to, and then they knew us so well that they could just make us try to forget that and then just think we had a normal daily life doing something, or make you think that it never happened, because part of the CIA is a family. And then I just told myself in the end I'd rather die than live one more day like this in that state of mind, because it's really hard to get out of when you're that deep into it. So, but I do respect the good, sane and decent people that do work for some of those agencies, and even NSA and the FBI. And the hardest thing for me to do ever was to pray for my enemies and to forgive. So these ones were the bad guys, though, and they told us even if we lived in a different city, they could still call you out because they had an access point. And so bringing down the frequencies was the main thing. And then you got to ensure that the enemy doesn't have any strongholds on you. And that's the biggest key to escaping that matrix of mind control, those access points, and to seal those up. Because once you connect to your higher self and higher source and get around good things and good people, then God will get you to where you need to be. So to me, Montauk was like a family that actually survived and came out of there, parts of it. And they broke up our families, they broke up our minds, and we bonded so strongly there that even if it wasn't for the best reasons, those bonds were still created. So, and some of those bonds we made with people there can't ever be broken. So if you have a bond with someone from these projects that you've made peace with, or that's helped you get past some trauma, just cherish those bonds and help each other. Don't hurt each other. And I just ask that when you find each other, just be real and genuine to each other and pray for each other, because some of us that found each other again and then were triggered again and then lost each other again, it's like losing a family member all over again, or a memory that you struggle to hold on to and don't want to lose. Because some of those involves that, people that were involved, they can remind you of unpleasant things, but they can also remind you of some really great and incredible things too. And just the insatiable nature of the soul and the human spirit in general. So good things can come out of it, and you just gotta figure out why, or why a person is giving you a reaction that they are. And don't ever be too prideful to turn to your creator and ask the creator of all things to show you the truth in all things, because he will. So I just hope that any of the survivors of Montauk would just get cleared this year, and I will talk to you soon.